Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos, a man who suffers from more folly even than the famous Florence Ziegfeld. Well, the date of publication of this episode of Musical Talk is the first day after the August bank holiday in 2017, and that means that the Edinburgh Festival Fringe finished yesterday. It was 3.5 weeks of the greatest cultural get-together in the world, because, as you probably know, the Edinburgh International Festival and its Fringe together make the biggest arts festival on the planet. And this year they were both celebrating their 70th anniversary. And for Musical Talk, it was our 11th trip to the Fringe to see the cream of new writing of musical theatre and a lot of old shows as well. There is genuinely something for everyone, depending on your taste, and of course it is, as described last year by Sarah Louise Young, a trade fair for the entertainment and arts world, which is ideal for Musical Talk because it means we can get to speak to some of the most interesting people currently working in the genre. Well, this year was an interesting year, I thought, because the festival seemed slightly smaller than usual, in the sense that the crowds were there, they were enormous, but they weren't perhaps quite as enormous as usual. It's usually a struggle to get down the Royal Mile during the flying hours of the day, which can be anything from about noon to about 7. But this year, although very crowded, it was possible to find a way through without too much difficulty. I don't want you getting the wrong idea. It was certainly a very full festival this year, but as I say, just slightly smaller than perhaps we've recently got used to. It reminded me very much of the festival in 2012, when there were definitely fewer people around because a large number of performers, both professional and amateur, were involved in the London Olympics, which were on at the same time. And in the same way, the number of people who might come up to the festival that year also didn't, because they were watching, quite understandably, the London Olympics. This year it's difficult to tell why the festival wasn't quite so big, but size is not quality. And the one thing I would certainly say about this year's Festival Fringe is that I thought that the quality, on average, was higher. There were, of course, the usual collection of absolutely average shows, some remarkable shows, some WTF shows, I certainly saw a few of those, where you just hold your breath, clench your buttocks and pray for the end of the show. But I would also say there were many, many more really top-notch shows. I'm pleased to say that I saw a good handful of 4- and 5-star shows, and certainly more than last year. So I feel very well served by this year's Fringe. Now, as always, I have recorded a large amount of material which we will play in various episodes over the next few months. But each year we try to broadcast our material from the Fringe in a slightly different way. And this year we're going to go straight in with our pick of the Fringe, because that's what today's episode is about. The only criteria for the Musical Talk pick of the Fringe every year is that it must be for new writing, which unfortunately means that 2 really remarkable productions of Thrill Me, the Leopold and Loeb story, and Into the Woods don't count, at least for the purposes of this award. And as I've already said, the quality this year was remarkably high. There were a number of other shows which were serious contenders for the award. And I should just say, by the way, a very special mention to the musical Buried, which absolutely gets the Silver Award, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that fantastic new show in a later episode. But today is all about the best show. And as I say, after much consideration, I am pleased to be able to say that this year's Musical Talk Pick of the Fringe is the wonderful new musical called Stop, the Musical. I mentioned it briefly last week, and we heard a short extract of the full interview that I conducted with the producer, the writer and the full cast, and we're going to hear that full interview later today. But why was this show so good? Well, honestly, it was the writing and the performances together. The show is a sensitive, but in no way heavy-handed, investigation into mental health issues. So before you run away, please bear with me. I have to say that I do understand that may not sound like the kind of show that you might want to go and see. But the show surpasses and indeed transcends its material by taking that thematic idea and turning it into a truly moving and pleasing story. It's 90 minutes of brilliantly, deftly written, wonderfully performed, clever writing. And that clever writing made it the best in field this year. So, what is Stop the musical about? Well, I'm going to read its official blurb. Stop is a new musical set at a bus stop in London. In arriving at the bus stop, our 4 characters have set in place dominoes that will eventually lead to their suicides. But the bus stop has other ideas. Through the conversations they strike up, the individuals have to consider what has led them to this point and what decision they are truly making by getting on the bus. You will get to know their musical personalities, their senses of humour, and what they learn from the transient relationships they develop with each other in the liminal space of the mysterious bus stop. And the show was developed in collaboration with Claude Michel Schonberg, who you may know as the composer of Les Miserables, so absolutely no slouch in the musical theatre writing business. The official blurb goes on to say, "The power of Stop is in the intimacy and the strength of the realism that is so essential to a performance of this kind. The contemporary importance of Stop is embedded in the development of character that is drawn out by Annabel Mutale-Reid's book and lyrics and Leo Mumby's music." And it's described in this way. Never failing to attack its mission head-on, Stop, on the OUDS National Tour, and the OUDS is the Oxford University Dramatic Society, is the contemporary dramatisation of mental health that the theatre world needs. Developed with mental health charity Sane, it is the perfect balance of humour, musicality and sobering realism, as it asks all the necessary questions about mental health amid a very funny and enjoyable production about 4 very different but very real characters. So, it tackles difficult subjects head-on, but it does it in such a deft and light way, as I've said, and with such great performances and real character, that you are immediately caught up in the individual worlds of the people we're seeing. And though a path to suicide is certainly one of the things that each of the characters we meet has, at least as a potential, the show also shows us other options. Maybe I can't describe this well enough, but I raved about this show. It was my delight to make it our 5-star pick of the Fringe. And it's not just Musical Talk which has spotted how good this show is. It's been getting 5-star reviews from lots of other sources and really excellent reviews here, there and everywhere. It's also coming to London this week, so there is a chance to see it if you didn't get to see it at the Fringe. More details about that later in the programme. But I think we really now must listen to the interview with the people behind it. I caught up with the book writer Annabel Mutale-Reid, who's also one of the actresses in the piece, along with her 3 fellow actors and the producer of the show, to find out how Stop came to be and how it came to be so good. But first, we're very privileged to be able to hear a song from that incredible score. This was taken from a live recording, so you can hear a little bit of microphone rubbing, but that should not distract from your enjoyment of hearing this song, which is later on discussed in the interview which you'll hear immediately afterwards with the people behind the excellent Stop the Musical.
Based on what's true. Results in a fight. But how can I say what I choose when I'm losing my voice?
How do we get on? How do we thrive? How do we prove to ourselves that we can survive?
It isn't that easy to know which route we should take. And whatever we do, it could be our biggest mistake.
How do we get on? How do we move through? How do we make a decision based on what's true?
Every decision we make results in a final choice. But how can I say what I choose?
Every decision we make results in a final choice. But how can I say what I choose when I'm losing my voice? Ourselves that we can survive. It isn't that easy to know which route we should take.
Whatever we do, it could be our biggest mistake.
How do we get on? How do we get on? How do we get on?
My name's Annabelle Mitali-Reid. I wrote the book and the lyrics for Stop, a new musical. I also co-directed it and played Martha, who's one of the 4 characters.
Quite the threat.
Yes, triple threat, very threatening.
I'm Jack Chinsky. I play Justin in the Edinburgh production of Stop, a young dancer suffering with agoraphobia as a complication of panic disorder.
I'm Gemma Lowcock. I play Chloe in the Edinburgh production of Stop, and she's a student of clinical psychology who has bipolar type 2.
I'm Owen McNeilis. I play Lewis in the Edinburgh production of Stop, and Lewis is a personal trainer from Essex who suffers from bulimia and body dysmorphic disorder, having had an abusive childhood.
I'm Naomi Chapman. I'm the producer of Stop's national tour this summer, and we're all from Oxford University.
Now, Stop the musical is, well, first of all, it's a brilliant piece. So I'd very much like to talk about how it came to be. But it's a curious piece as well, isn't it? In a sense, there are some shows which are throwaway shows, and this is not one of them. This is a show that's entirely engaging, it's compelling, it's startling in its way, but it has such worth. And these are combinations one doesn't find that often, not always at the Fringe. So I believe that you are the mother of the being. Would you care to explain, how did it come to be? Because it has an interesting creative process, doesn't it? It is here to do something. It isn't just speech marks and entertainment.
So hopefully it is entertaining.
Oh, it is that.
But I think there were 2 real sort of reasons that this was the story we told. I love theatre, I love movies, but something that's always frustrated me a little bit has been that there are certain characters who always play the helper, the friend who helps the normally straight white bloke solve his problems, and that's the sort of the mystically wise black lady and the sort of acidic gay friend and the manic pixie dream girl and the like silly buffoon best friend. And Leo and I were having a conversation about writing a musical set at a bus stop, and we thought it would be interesting if these people all met each other and helped each other. And also the other thing was I had a personal experience of I was admitted to hospital following a really bad period of mental health, and what that did was it meant that I had time to stop, and I listened to musicals the whole time, and actually it wasn't as awful or tragic as it sounds, but what it did was it made me...
Sorry, it does depend on the music.
Yes, it did. Love Never Dies was one of the ones I was listening to. I was listening to a lot of Evita and
I see where your
Company.
tastes lie, if I may
Well,
say.
actually, I had CDs and a CD player, so that was what I was listening to, and Parade as well. So I just had time to sit around listening to musicals and collect my thoughts. And so we'd already had this idea about this bus stop musical, and I thought, sort of drawing on those experiences, it would be quite important for those 4 people, the 4 helpers, to all be struggling with something. And I don't think we see enough people with mental illnesses portrayed as humans helping other human, like helping. They're normally either the sort of like the helper,
Yes.
or somebody who's completely lost
They're never
their
allowed
way.
to be centre stage.
Yeah.
So it has dual purpose in some sense. It is about actually allowing... I'm going to use the word stereotype because that's what they've become so often in drama. all of the identifications that you've mentioned, and many, many more. So it's allowing people to be centre stage and being characters in their own right, rather than being identified as ciphers, essentially.
Yeah.
We all know what we're talking about here. Your validation is only given to you by other speech marks, more normal people. So I think that's fantastic. But also the destigmatisation of mental health. This sounds very earnest. The show itself, however, allows itself to be brilliant and not... Earnestness can be sometimes a little bit heavy-handed. There's no heavy-handedness in this. That's not to say that it's fluffy and ephemeral. It has meaning and it has heart and it has bottom, as we used to say in the old days. But I like the fact that you've done something good with it. But the very starting point was very interesting. I liked it. You decided you wanted to write a musical about a bus stop, and then all the other things came to it. So what is your what is the fetish here? I mean,
I'm a Londoner, and I've spent a lot of time at London bus stops.
As have I.
And bus stops are, you make a decision. Anyone can be there. Also, it's sort of very ordinary. I think quite a lot of representations of people who suffer with mental illnesses, it can be very, very middle class. And I think bus stops are sort of places where ordinary people make decisions. And
it's thinking time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, I think all of the songs in the show are people having just made a decision or making a decision through the show. How do we get on, which is the sort of pivotal moment of the show, is just a song about how do we make decisions. And I think bus stops that was a good vehicle, if you'll excuse the pun, for a place where people were making decisions.
That makes perfect sense, yes. I mean, there's nothing forced about the environment, although you do, I think you describe it rather splendidly in the advertising as a liminal space, a mysterious bus stop.
Yes.
And the great thing about this bus stop is it's both, isn't it? It is absolutely a real bus stop where real people are meeting. And yet it is also, it allows itself to, if you like, to sort of go off into some plane where it does other things and then comes down. The buses are very irregular on the service.
Yeah,
but
I know.
they do seem to come at just the right moment when they're needed. Very much unlike real life.
Yes. But the other thing about it being a bus stop is it kind of gave us the opportunity to to leave once the decision had been made
in a very real, naturalistic way.
Yeah. So we worked quite a lot on making sure we were really outside and really travelling, but at the same time being able to kind of stay in those conversations and stop.
It does use space very cleverly as well, because there are moments when we see various of the characters in various states of their time, lives, mental health states, and in different physical places as well. And it all seems to move so smoothly, and the transitions are very nice as well. And if the show is about anything, it must be about transition in some sense.
Yeah, and the idea behind it being a mysterious bus stop, the slightly spooky element of it, is that the bus stop is somehow this omnipotent force that can see that the decision you're making is going to give you, sort of be the domino that falls, leading to a cascade of events that leads to each of the characters' suicides or sort of self-destruction in one way or another. And it's only when the bus stop recognises that the domino that's being pushed is a different one, that the decision is going to avoid that. And in most of the cases it is people opening up and asking for help. And we see the premonition of the way that it will turn out now that the decision's changed. So the bus stop gives us a bit of a helping hand in those decisions.
Well, that's also overtly stated in the narrative in some senses, isn't it? Gemma, your character actually says at one moment, shall I walk away to a different bus, which presumably would take you to a slightly different destination or a different route. So, I mean, I appreciate I'm maybe over looking at this. And then there's the moment about every decision we make could be the worst decision of our life. I mean, that is... Obviously, that's true. One doesn't dwell on it normally, but of course that can be an issue that one thinks about. So I like the fact that the narrative is tying in with the general story and the points of the story. I'm trying to pull it together to say, it's cohesive. It seems to me to be cohesive and thought through. It's not just an arbitrary set of things happening by any means. The whole thing flows with, naturalism is the word I keep coming back to, and I know it's other people have identified the naturalism of the piece. I'm going to talk a little bit more about its creation as we go on, but I would like to talk about the performances, which of course underpin it. Now, you are one of the performers, and we have three of your fellow, the three
Yes.
fellow performers with you. How did you all join the project? And bearing in mind that it is, I'm going to use the word again, important, was that in any way daunting to you?
Well, we did.
It's an open question, and you may phone a friend.
We auditioned, and these were the best people for the job. But I don't know why you decided to audition.
I auditioned initially for the first Oxford run, the first instalment of the show in January. I had met Annabelle at a dinner in Oxford, and we had got chatting about this new musical that she'd written. And
it was a dinner and not a bus stop.
It was, yeah, exactly. There must have been a bus stop somewhere involved. But yeah, got chatting about this new musical. I think she kind of explained to me the two male characters, and I had a real, well, I really, really loved the concept of the show. I loved each of the characters, and I saw a lot of Lewis in a lot of people that I knew. So I thought it would be a very interesting project to be part of. I'd very much enjoy it, and I thought I could bring a relatively decent performance to the
I can
show,
assure
so.
you achieved relative decency and possibly more.
So,
yes,
thanks
very
very
much. It's
much.
an excellent performance.
Thank you. So then that was back in January. We seemed to do all right, and then re-auditioned again for the tour, and was lucky enough to get it again. So,
but what made you want to do it? Is it just you saw connections with the character?
Saw connections with the character. Annabelle and Leo are incredibly talented people.
Oh, yes.
And that was well known to me before this. And yeah, I thought it was a very, very special show. Great people working with it, so why not give it a go? Didn't expect to get it, but there you go.
Well, you're here now.
Thanks very much.
I suppose I'm the anomaly because I wasn't part of the original January run. There was another girl, Kathy Peacock, playing Chloe. So I had the privilege of seeing the show with a complete fresh pair of eyes, and I was absolutely blown away. It was just so clear how much work and research and love had been put into this show, and it was clear that the people working on it were really just passionate about telling this story and getting the word out. So when I heard about the national tour, I knew I had to audition, and I've just loved the process. It's been wonderful being part of the show. Yeah.
Do you find that character in any way a challenge to get hold of?
Yeah, I mean, I think
quite high energy.
yeah, there's parts of Chloe that a lot of students can find in themselves. I think we all know how it feels to be stressed, and how I think we all know how it feels to try and put on a brave face and not let others know. You don't want your colleagues to know that you're stressed about stuff. So in some senses, I can recognise a lot of people I know in Chloe, and then others heightening them, I guess. I'm tapping into. I mean, we had such great resources. Annabelle had done so much research into these characters. She talked to a lot of clinical psychologists and people with the illnesses. So it was really useful having her, and we have a couple, like Owen's a medical student, for example, and some of the other people working on the team study psychology. So it was useful having them as well to be able to make sure the characters were accurate representations of the illnesses.
Dramaturgs.
Yeah.
So Dr. Helen Beckworth was my main sort of official go-to person, and she helped with a lot of the research. But I think the most wonderful thing about this process has been it's been really collaborative as far as the characterization is concerned. We've had to do something slightly weird, which has been there are certain thought patterns and things which are symptoms of the illnesses, so we've had to make sure that those are being presented truthfully. But as far as the people, as far as Chloe, Justin, Lewis and Martha, that developing those characters has really been a collaborative thing. There's so much that we've just all had to bring into the room, and I think a lot of what we've done in the rehearsal room has made its way into the script now.
Well, you said something interesting there, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But
so Annabelle, Leo and I were all attending musical theatre writing workshops in late 2016 with Claude, Michel, Schonberg, which is where I first came across the music and the work. And I saw it in its very early proto stages and more or less couldn't avoid getting involved because it was obviously fantastic work that I wanted to be a part of. So
it's a honey trap, wasn't it?
quite so. So I auditioned for that first run in January at the BT in Oxford, and it was a fabulous experience. And it is the character of Justin has been a really interesting one to play, and there is definitely a responsibility to represent these illnesses accurately, which is it is a big responsibility, given that we're trying to reduce stigma, but also to make sure that they're not just a collection of symptoms, that these are people. And it's been really interesting researching the illnesses in particular. Agoraphobia of these, I think, is probably one of the least well understood, and certainly I didn't understand it before I came to the role, and it's been eye-opening to be involved and to talk with the charity Sane and attend their workshops and look over Annabelle's research for the roles.
Well, you've said something which actually just adds to what you were saying, Annabelle, and this is the question I want to ask. Now, this may sound like a stupid question, so you must tell me if I'm misunderstanding. But I don't know the answer to this. Is there a difference, a dichotomy between the personality and the symptoms? Have you had to add the symptoms to the personality? Did you identify the personality first and then add the symptoms? I'm using the symptoms horribly here. Or are the illnesses part of the people enough to be part of the character? I'm not putting this at all well. Where are they separate and where are they together? And therefore, how can you develop these characters in a way that's holistic? Which is the warts and all aspects of it. I've not put that well, but I'm sure you're much more intelligent people than I and can define a question in that.
I think it's something that we've spoken about at length, actually, and the reality is that when we're thinking about the sort of beliefs and the behaviours that are associated with each of the illnesses, obviously those were
and the perceptions, presumably.
Yeah, well, the perception's the thing that we wanted to challenge, and so in the first time we meet all of the characters, we see Chloe, who is in a hypermanic episode, being, annoying and chatting too much and speaking to and there's a line in the show about low inhibitions, and she definitely has sort of irritatingly low inhibitions, and Lewis comes across as very bullshy and overly into his appearance and
self-regarding.
So we did actually want to kind of build up these stereotypes and then kind of break them down a little bit. But as far as the line between the symptoms and the personality is concerned, we basically wanted to play characters with these illnesses as opposed to showcasing some symptoms. So the research was really helpful, because if you talk to real people, there are obviously things that are common to people's experiences when they have a specific illness, but also there's a lot of different ways to be a person. There's a lot of different ways to be somebody with panic disorder.
So trying to just, in a strange sense, it's the difference between describing someone as, for example, a schizophrenic or someone with schizophrenia.
Yeah, and I think hopefully we were playing the characters that we've created are characters who, well, we see them all when they're on having a really good day. So we see them all when they are at the real crisis moment of their mental illness. So we see them having a really bad day, which is one of the titles of one of the songs, and we also see them when they are getting better. And I think because we know what happens to them when they have a good day, that informed a lot of them being real people to us.
I think a lot of it as well is that all of these characters have objectives, desires, relationships that have nothing to do with their illness. These are actually, their desires, relationships and objectives are all compromised by their illness, but having those separate from them, like Justin wanting to go to dance school, Lewis wanting to propose to his girlfriend, these are all humanizing, that don't actually have anything to do with the illness, obviously.
The run-of-the-mill stuff that we all do.
And the most important aspect of the show in terms of reducing stigma is that all the four characters are very relatable. I think you can see aspects of yourself in a lot of the characters, and in terms of portraying an effective image, then you need to you need to have that first and foremost. You have to have humanised them before you can add anything more.
There is this. It's back to the challenge. I mean, it seems to you achieve it all. There is no false step in this at all. So it appears to me, as an audience, an audient, I suppose, the singular one. But it's still. I suppose I'm grappling, because I'm not a creative person in the way that you all are. But I suppose I'm grappling with the difficulty of balancing those things, as would be experienced in real life by somebody with any of these mental health problems. I'm not putting this at all well, by the way, sorry. I suppose you do see the whole range of personality, as you say, the good days, the bad days, their ambitions, what they want. And your range is very much on show, I suppose, that's what I'm trying to say. Has there been a moment where you've had to turn something off because it's been untrue? And how have you discovered what that is? That might be the question I was trying to push to.
When I was doing the original run in Oxford, we had a character dinner at one point.
Oh, this is an interesting concept. What's a character dinner?
So,
I guess, but I'd like to know.
We all, one of the characters, Lewis, I believe, hosted us all as our characters for dinner.
Margot cooked for us.
And,
This is fantastic.
it was a wonderful exercise to try and get to know the characters and explore them a little in a social setting and see them in situations that aren't in the script, and let us fill in the blanks for ourselves and create more colourful, realistic people. One thing I found was that panic disorder is often. There was I was playing Justin at the time as being incredibly socially anxious, and I realised that that wasn't necessarily something that occurred always with panic disorder, and I felt that that should be removed from his character to perhaps be more truthful to the illness as I had researched it, and that was one of the things that I omitted from the character in the original and this run.
I think that was one of the best things, actually, to really the way that Jack plays Justin. He's really sort of isolated the symptoms, so they're not sort of bleeding into a whole personality. But I think one of the reasons that it's a bus stop and not a coffee shop or anywhere else is because I think there's a lot that the Britishness of it being awkward and slightly funny for everyone to have somebody start talking to you at a bus stop. And I think there's a parallel there with how awkward we feel as British people talking about mental health.
Back to social transgression, in fact. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that the Chloe's character, the way Gemma plays Chloe, it is awkward and it makes us feel uncomfortable at the bus stop. But I think that's always all of those kind of slightly funny moments where, you know, everyone's had that moment of just wishing that they could get on the bus so that they don't have to have a chat with somebody. All of those moments sort of come from Gemma's sort of understanding of the beliefs and the illness. So there's never, I think it's particularly true of the way that you play Chloe. There's never just being, you know, this sort of manic pixie dream girl who talks too much. There's always a reason, and I think you've probably, Gemma, had to work sort of even harder than the rest of us to get into that thought pattern, which is quite unlike somebody who doesn't suffer with bipolar disorder type 2.
You are to use the term again, you are the transgressor in a strange way, whereas the other people are the people who are being transgressed against out of societorial norms. I can't say that properly, but you get the idea. That is quite a, you know, you launch the piece in a way, don't you? I mean, you do come on and it's your first interaction that gets the whole, I was going to say train rolling, but that doesn't seem right. Yeah. Circumstances, yeah.
Very off-brand.
Yes. Well, I've just told you that. So obviously, you've been complimented on how well you do that. Do you find social transgression easy in real life?
No, I am not. I am the person who at a bus stop has headphones in. I do not talk to anyone. I have a book, and I take a book to the hairdresser, so I don't have to speak.
I hope I'm not putting you to any
I mean, I'm a nice person, I promise, but I'm just not very good at talking to people. So yeah, in a way that's actually been really fun, being the person who gets everyone talking, everyone opening up. Yeah, there's a bit at the bus stop where Chloe just barges in. She barges in between Lewis and Martha. She's keen to get involved in the conversation. She sits too close to them, and yeah.
There's that lovely bit here that you pull right up. and you could, where I was in the audience, you could feel the audience almost flinching. There is that British reserve thing, which we've all got, culturally it has to be there.
Not me.
All of us
Exactly.
I think one of the loveliest parts of what Leo's done with the music is there's a particular sort of bell note that plays in the piano part every time Chloe decides to start a conversation. And every time she starts a conversation, it's really good that she is doing that. It always sort of opens people up. But every time we hear that, I think the audience goes, "Oh no, please,
The next
so
one."
awkward."
Yeah.
But each of the characters has wonderful nexus points. We see the path to, well, you've said it, the path to suicide. We see the path to a better way of happiness without being cheesy. I mean, these are worked for positions. This isn't arbitrary. This isn't fairyland. These are recognition of the problems and then addressing them. The characters all come to terms in their own way with what it is at least they can do to enhance their circumstances.
Our
but these are
key, the pivotal song is "How Do We Get On," and in their happy endings, we didn't want to show the fairy tale. We just wanted to see them getting on, with their lives. There's a metaphor there with the bus.
With the actual lyrics, how do we get on?
It's how do we get on.
Yes. And there's that lovely moment where they can't get on, isn't there, as well? There was a figurative bus that isn't very friendly, if we can attribute the bus with those characteristics. But I do like those nexus points. Everyone's going to say sliding doors. It's just lazy shorthand for it. But actually, that opportunity of looking at options is a really interesting way of seeing what goes on, and the characterisation is beautifully carried out in each of your cases, in each direction. I've said it before, but I will say it again, the performances are flawless. It's absolutely beautiful all the way through.
Very nice.
I feel I ought to ask about unsung heroes, because producers are unsung heroes. Because not only
favourite words to hear.
and they don't have a song, so you can't be a sung.
I think that's good.
But how is the show from your point of view? Because you produce it, so you've been involved in it for a long time. What's your history with the piece?
So I worked as the executive producer for the original run in Oxford, which meant that I didn't do much of the day-to-day work, but they used my bank account, and if the producer needed any help, she messaged me. But it meant that I got to see it with really fresh eyes and saw it and just wept for like an hour and a half. And then Annabelle approached me and asked if I'd be interested in doing this as a tour, and I just absolutely was, because I think it's just the most important piece. One of the things we witnessed in the original Oxford run was just everyone leaving the theatre, starting conversations. That's one of the things we've really been trying to do, is start conversations that people wouldn't otherwise have, that actually will have real tangible effects in people's lives. And so that we wanted to carry that on into a national tour, which I think we've been really blown away with the response to, and how successful we've been in doing that thus far. Yeah, so it's kind of been most of my life for the last 7 months. Yeah, but it's...
Naomi also built the bus stop.
My one set designer credit.
I've got to ask though, is it based on the real bus stop? Because it's even got scratched graffiti. I can't say it. It's got scratched graffiti on the perspex.
Yeah,
I've been at many a bus stop like that. In fact, my bus stop disappeared recently.
Yeah, so we had quite a fun day where once it was built, I invited our stage manager around, and we were like, right, how can we make this
real?
Yeah, more real. So we got Lost Dog posters and adverts for tutors and scratching away, and it's just quite because I don't know, I'm not sure about how realistic it is, because whenever I go to bus stops in London, they're like so shiny and new, but where I live, it's all graffiti and
they're not all like that.
Yeah. But no, It's not based on a specific one, but just a bus stop that everyone can recognise, really.
Even down to the mesh seats.
Mm.
We've all sat on those impossibly uncomfortable. You more
Yeah.
than anyone. I think 90 minutes of, I'm going to say it, waffle bottoms. You do give up a lot for your art, if I may say. Are you suing? Are they comfortable? Is it a practical consideration? Is it a practical prop?
We suffer for our art. No, they're very
You suffer for your arse as well, if I may say that, sorry.
You may not.
I'm so sorry. I've lowered the tone again.
But I think, so one of the things that I'm really proud of is everyone has a moment of sitting on those uncomfortable seats on their own and making that decision that makes that, you know, does the sliding doors thing and changes the future.
Can I tell you one of the things I thought was most effective, oddly? There's various moments where it goes into semi-blackout. Mm-hmm. And some of you are standing and some of you are sitting on the chairs. And then for about 5 seconds, you then change your position, but you're still in semi-blackout, which suggests time passing and thoughts happening and addressing your issues. It's a very effective way, it seems to me, of suggesting thoughtfulness and time passing in a very non-time passing kind of a way, if that makes sense, not in real time. But I thought just that twilight aspect of it and the move to, you know, people do move around, don't they, at bus stops? No one queues anymore. But I thought that was it felt absolutely real to me, that. Just I could see people doing that in my head when you do see people at bus stops thinking about things and they sort of wander around or change seats, or so it seemed to me at least.
One of the lovely parts of Leo's score is that those transition bits in the music where I think you do hear the time passing, and there's this sort of suggestion of the themes sort of coming through as they're making those decisions. So hopefully that's something that kind of married with the way that we do it.
Well, the marriage of the lyrics and the music is excellent anyway, because actually I don't know how you find it as singers. It almost sounds like the conversation is resting on a bed of music. It's the scansion and the delivery. It seems to be natural delivery. I mean, it's not sung. It's not Sprechungen. I can't say it, but you know, it's not Rex Harrison style speak singing, but it does have that. The cadences rest comfortably on the music, or so it seems to me. You do go and see shows where words sit heavily. I think that would be the nicest way of putting it, or the metrics are all wrong, or whatever it is. But I didn't get a bit of that today, and once again, that's performance, but it is the writing, it's the creativity. But the lyrics sound, the words are real, you know, in the sense that they sound like real conversations to me, and the music carries that so perfectly. It's a fugue of the ideas, actually.
That's
so it seems.
Beautifully put.
Well, thank you. You can review me.
Yeah, I think I think we were really, really keen that, although we were writing a musical, and I think there's some really gorgeous melodies and stuff, that everything sounded like people having a conversation. And so even in those sort of quite big moments, people aren't singing in the way that you would have a conversation in their sort of idiosyncratic ways. And I rap, which was new for me.
Not everyone can do it.
Yes. Watch out, Lin-Manuel.
I'll let you know. But so I must ask then, the audiences have been taking it really well, and you were saying that people were talking conversationally. Even as we left today, there were people outside flyering saying, "Oh, people were in tears and crying." So, what has been the feedback to you personally and as a group? And it must have been positive all the way, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely been fully positive, and just people saying that this is so important. This has changed. What was that person said the other day? This has changed her life.
That's not bad.
And I think for a lot of people, it's just suddenly like to actually see a piece of art that addresses mental health accurately and with love and compassion is just so refreshing. Because so many people who see it I can't imagine anyone not having experiences that overlap with the content of the show, and so for everyone, it's just kind of a relief to see it done properly, I think.
Done properly is exactly right, but please.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think what's also really lovely is it can be quite daunting. I don't know, if you're told you're about to see a musical about mental health, it can be quite daunting and it might seem like it would be quite heavy, but actually the musical is really uplifting and it has a very hopeful message. And I think that's what a lot of audiences have been saying, is that actually it's exactly that, it's hopeful.
Well, I'm sure you spotted this. Does this happen every night? That when the getting on the bus part has occurred and the trajectory towards a happier or a more positive solution occurs for each of the characters one by one, whatever that is, people were applauding the non-musical parts as well. I'm afraid they didn't for you, but that's because you go straight into the very end. So Chloe's character doesn't quite get that. There was also one song that you didn't get applause on, but it wasn't because the audience weren't loving it. It's because actually the music...
The bus arrived.
Yeah, and the music stops just before the end, so you carry that last bit sort of a cappella, and I don't think people realised the song was over, and by then we were into the dialogue. So I think you should all... Everyone wanted to clap everything. Something that I was getting kind of a suppressed sense of, let's enjoy this thoroughly. But there was warmth emanating from the stage, from the seats that I could feel. Did it get as far as you under the lights?
I think whenever we have an audience, there is a moment, and it's normally quite early on in the show, where we just feel like the audience is on our side. The audience is on the side of the characters. They're rooting for us, and I think it was quite unexpected until we had it on its feet that people would applaud the non-musical. They're having a nice time now. They're getting on, but I think that's a symptom of people being on our side, and that's the nicest feeling in the world. And also, it's always, you always feel like people are on side when they start laughing.
Yes. Me and Annabelle always look at... So Lewis and Martha start off stage, and the two other characters have very funny dialogue at the beginning, and when we get the first laugh, me and Annabelle always turn around and nod, wink at each other. This is good and this is going to go well.
The audience are here.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you can tell a British audience relaxing when they're laughing. They once one laugh has occurred, they know they can do it.
I think that's exactly the important thing. Once you break that, because Justin's first scene is probably the heaviest in the show.
And once again, Twilight lighting.
Yeah, I mean, Jack does an absolutely fabulous job of it. I don't know how he does it so consistently every time, but he's a very talented boy.
You'll go places.
But the thing is, I suppose after seeing that scene, are people going to be in the mood for laughing? And once you break that wall down, then they very much get on side.
License
so
is
that's it, exactly.
Once people know that they are allowed to laugh in a musical about mental health, it's just like, you can do this.
I think that was one of we, as Jack mentioned, we've been doing these workshops with Claude Michel Schonberg, and he has been just absolutely amazing and really, really supportive, and given us loads of great advice. And I think when we first pitched the concept to him, he said, "Oh, sounds a bit depressing," coming from the man who wrote Les Mis.
The clue is there, isn't it?
So we thought, okay, we've really got to make sure that this isn't an hour and a half of people feeling somber and reflective, and actually that there is a sort of getting involved in laughing and enjoying these people and their lives and rooting for them. So that's,
we all start laughing eventually.
Yes,
usually.
So he did make us feel like we had a license to, in our writing about mental illness, we had a license to be light and funny in places, because actually mental illness is awkward and messy and funny, and there's I think there's a lot of laughing because you don't quite know what else to do in the show.
Well, it wouldn't fly if it was heavy-handed, and it's certainly not heavy-handed, and that's, I mean that massively as a compliment. People often mistake lightness for lack of seriousness, but I think this treads that path of being both. It has seriousness and lightness, and it's all the better for it. So, I'm actually going to do something, this may seem a little bit blunt as an interview technique, but I'm going to go down the line one by one and ask you what your favourite part of the show is. Sometimes it throws up a few things. Obviously, I'm coming to you first, so everyone else has got thinking time.
I don't know.
Well, that's not the answer I was expecting.
Well, can I have two?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so my the first thing I always love hearing, and I love the music, is there's a moment where we all sit down at the bus stop and everyone is belting their best notes in 4-part harmony, singing "How do we get on? How do we get on? How do we move through?"
It feels like end of Act 1, actually.
Yes, it is really. And actually, linking the next thing that happens after that is quite a serious reflection about the future and the possibility that they might end up dying. And straight after that, we go into my other favourite bit, which is "Treat Yourself," which is a really silly vaudeville, kind of somewhere between vaudeville and Cole Porter inspired list song about how Martha's convincing Lewis that he should indulge in ice cream and all of these things, and he's saying, "Oh, have a drink, treat yourself," and it sort of escalates into crack cocaine. And
yes, it starts with cake, doesn't it?
It
goes a long way.
It starts with Toad in the Hole
that's
and
right.
ends up with ketamine.
What an evening
and
that was. This isn't a reenactment of your workshop, was it?
yeah, we have really fun dinner parties. But yes, so I think those two moments are my two favourite moments, and I like the way they contrast with each other.
Yes, they're semi-linked, aren't they? That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Good call.
I think as performers, one of my favourite moments in the show is at the end of "How Do We Get On," the Act 1 closer, where we all stand in line at the front and one by one step out of character and read our characters' obituaries, and then step backwards back into the skin of those characters. And I think that's as we all just stand there and the audience has to watch these four people doing, actually, like, because after we've read the obituaries, we're just waiting for the bus. It's just four people waiting for the bus with these invisible illnesses that are taking them on this horrible, destructive path that the bus stop is trying to subvert. And I think that's especially after How Do We Get On, where these characters all are confused and don't know what path to take. That is certainly one of my favourite moments in the entire show. And
it's quite desolate.
It is.
But it's desolate for the audience as well, because the audience gets to know the characters by that stage and has some sense for them. And then, you're being taken away from us, as it were. Yeah.
I think, having not seen the show, I can't attest to this, but I do think that it's a wonderful moment, because I feel like at that point the audience could almost like reach out and like grab us and say, like, "Don't do it, like, please stop, like, can't you see?" And
audience hugs.
Exactly. And I think that's important in the narrative as well. It's the narrative of mental illness and trying to represent it well, that these are invisible things that just reaching out and talking can help with. But I am off stage for perhaps the last quarter of the show after my good day, and I think my favourite actual moment is "Stop," the final song, as performed by Gemma. The character of Chloe is sat alone at the bus stop trying to figure out what her next step is, and I think it's so just fabulously affecting and honest and just down to the bone truthful as a song lyrically, and its momentum. I think it's a beautiful moment and so relatable. I'd be amazed if anyone in that audience couldn't relate to what Chloe is going through at that moment, and I think that's probably my favourite moment of the whole show.
Real isolation in that moment as well.
Yeah.
So it's only fitting to hear yours.
So I have got two also.
I think we've
Too hard to
established
pick.
there's a precedent.
One of them is definitely Lewis's song "Tell the Truth."
You're so generous to each other.
I think it's just a wonderful moment of being able to see a man be honest and truthful and vulnerable. And I know many of my guy friends have, really struggled. I think it's common with men to struggle to be able to feel like you can open up and you can be vulnerable and you can ask for help. And I just think it's a really wonderful moment of seeing this tough guy who spends his whole life lifting weights and being a lad, and it's just really beautiful seeing him being fragile and open and allowing himself to,
There's a beautiful construction in that as well, without giving anything away. The last note isn't sung, is it? Or the last word isn't given in order to allow it to have the resonance it must have later on.
Exactly.
I think that's very beautiful, by the way. I do. So, yes, nice structural work.
Yeah.
It's a very recent change, that.
Oh, is it really? Well, I can't say, I don't know what it was like, but that works so well. I think
we think it's a good choice.
Yeah. I concur.
And then my second favourite moment is a little bit selfishly, the reprise of How Do We Get On that Chloe and Martha sing together. I just think, first of all, I love singing with Annabelle. I love being able to belt into her face and look at each other. And also, it's just a really beautiful moment of two women supporting each other and asking these questions together and looking to each other for answers. And it's something that doesn't always happen in a lot of musicals or films or whatever.
Drama,
having two women.
stop.
Yeah, exactly.
We passed the Abdel test.
Yeah, exactly. That is the moment where we, exactly. So it's just a wonderful moment for the characters and for, I hope Animal agrees, for the actors as well.
That is really special. Being, two women who are left alone and asking each other for help. I really love, and belting into each other's faces.
So I think
How many first?
if everyone else is going to have two, I may as well have two as well. I think my first favourite moment in the show is You Don't Know, because it comes out of nowhere. I mean, Martha and Lewis are kind of starting to open up about things, and Justin comes in very, kind of semi-aggressively with his treatment of Lewis. Near enough, yeah, exactly. And it's just a very beautiful portrayal of what's kind of been building up inside him and his day-to-day struggles. And you kind of during that song, there's a moment where it's not quite a freeze frame, but the other three characters are kind of stood still but they're going through each of their own psychologies, with themselves. And Jack is sat at the bus stop, and I look over at him to begin with, and I hear all the words, and then I look back at him afterwards, and he's just built them up into this, such a state. It's quite powerful to watch every time when you turn back and well, how's he managed to do that again? And I think for, it's a different song to all of our other ones in that it's not quite as, do you know what I mean? Arguably tear-inducing, but it is very powerful in the way that it's just a shocking thing to see, and a very
pain comes out in
that's it
buckets,
exactly.
Unfortunately, it's watching someone escape from being bound, but angrily, or that's how it
absolutely
across.
And
bound being the word.
Self-affirmation, and it's a very special moment. And my other one is, I'm going to go with Jack again, is Stop at the end. It's after Chloe having instigated all of these conversations with the other characters, helped everyone get through. They have Martha and Chloe have a little dialogue at the end where Martha says, "Are you all right?" And to anybody who would be at that bus stop at this point in time, she would seem okay, just a little bit stressed, whereas the audience knows more. I forget what that literary device is called, but the audience knows that she's not in the best of places. So it's difficult to watch that, and then when the lights come up again, it looks like a very, very lonely place at the bus stop. She's there all on her own, and like I say, it's very, very beautiful lyrics and very beautifully performed.
I think what's lovely about it as well, when I think it was Leo who was saying this, that it was the first song that you guys wrote together, and it serves as a microcosm for the whole show. It's it just sums it all back up into one song, starting not knowing what to do, being lost, and then having the middle section being looking at this negative future that could happen, and then a resolution where she decides she is going to ask for help. Which I just think is really lovely.
Sorry, I'm now taking a third. So there's a song that I think Leo and I are really, really proud of in the show called You Matter Today, which Martha sings. It's inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. Yes. It's Martha talking to her husband, who she's revealed is very depressed and We know he's suicidal, and one of the most interesting and upsetting things that I found doing my research was the kind of the disparity in the way that particularly black men are treated when they are mentally ill. I really like the fact that it's quite a bold moment for Martha to be a black woman at a bus stop, just saying, you know, I matter, and it doesn't matter if I'm not perfect. I'm really proud of that as a song. I think we keep hoping that, like, oh, you know, well, when we're doing this in a couple of years' time, Black Lives Matter won't be as relevant, and we keep kind of hoping that will happen, and then another awful thing happens, and you remember that actually even... So I think the thing about Martha's character is that she's a lawyer, she's a middle-class black lady.
All the trappings of success.
All the trappings of success, but she's still a member of this group who she sees being marginalised and attacked and being treated like they don't matter. And I think Leo and I, we got quite upset when the kind of All Lives Matter response to Black Lives Matter was really everywhere on social media, because we thought, you know, well, as everybody did really, like, the fact that saying Black Lives Matter is at all controversial. No. How is that meant to make any black person, no matter how successful they are, feel to be a member of that group? So You Matter Today
so it's a cri de coeur, really, the song, in a sense. I don't know what's been happening, by the way, the last 5 minutes. It's been very thrilling. It was a song that we needed to write, we needed to include, because of the importance in discussing race when we're having these conversations that we're starting about mental illness. But I think conversation is the word. All the issues that are raised in this are not going to be resolved in 2 years' time, but if the conversation will be pushed on a little bit by what we've seen today, and hopefully for a lot longer.
My favourite key change is that song as well.
Is that a third choice? But there is someone who hasn't had a go yet. Go on.
With everyone having about 3 goes, I think the whole show has been covered.
I think all spreadsheets are lovely.
Okay, 2 favourites. I do. Bad Day is just the most cleverly written song. I think it astounds me that it's been written by 2 people who have not had any education in this before. Like, as in, it's the kind of song that I imagine people aspire to write at the end of their careers. I think it's incredible. It's so clever. It's so catchy, annoyingly so. So that it's just also just a wonderful spectacle to watch, and the audience always loves it. Having now watched the show dozens of times, they always love it. The other song that's always been my favourite is Talking to James, which I think is a really interesting one because it's the only song which you see as the kind of the external, when you see the 4 characters external to mental illness, and seeing how do you start the conversations that people need to be having more frequently, and how do you help. And it's just very validating. It's saying Martha is frustrated that she doesn't know what to say and she can't seem to help, but you see through the course of the show that her just being there is the most helpful thing she can provide. And that song I just always find incredibly moving. It's also just objectively an incredible song to listen to. It's beautiful. So I think that's always been my favourite moment of the show, that song.
Well, I can undoubtedly tell you that this is a 5-star show. You will have been told that already. You will be told it again, but I'm telling you now. It's a 5-star show. It's 5-star for the writing. It's a 5-star for the performances. It's even 5-star for the production.
Hey.
That is a good bus stop. But
Good bus
where
stop.
does it go now? It must be going somewhere. Are you able to tell us if it's going any further than Edinburgh?
So, well, immediately it's going to the Cockpit Theatre in London.
And where is that?
Marylebone.
Oh, right. Can you get there by bus?
Yes, definitely. There, lots of buses go there.
Go and live the life.
Even the night bus. So you can even get the bus home. Yeah. So we're going to the Cockpit,
And what days?
The
Because it is immediately after you're leaving here, isn't it?
Immediately, yeah. Be there on the 30th through
August.
30th of August through to the 2nd of September. And following that, we'd obviously like to take it on to the sort of the next step. We want to tell this story to as many people as possible. And so following that, doing a professional workshop is the next logical stop.
I see what you did there. It's very good. So it's got a future beyond that, we hope. So very much a way. People should stay in contact. So do you have a website or a Facebook page or a Twitter? Or is this where producers really? Is this where you come into your own?
So our website is www.stopthemusical.com. Our Twitter and Instagram handles are stopthemusical and facebook.com/stopmusical. You can follow, make your homepage, all of those things, and keep up with the future of the show because it's really exciting.
We're really hoping that the Twitter handle Stop the Musical isn't going to come back to bite us. But it hasn't yet.
Stop this travesty. It's a wonderful show. You're fabulous people. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
I wish you great success, and I know that you'll all achieve it in all your different and collective spheres, if that's all right. But thank you. Marvellous. Such a wonderful conversation, such a wonderful show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our families aren't broken. We descend from kings and queens. Black mothers aren't just mothers and don't live in extremes. And a man who's mentally ill and black whispers before he screams. So I promise I'll listen hard, and I'll never disregard your worries and dreams. You matter today. You're loved and you're heard. You're the air in the trees. You're the warmth on the breeze. And you don't have to utter a word. Excellence isn't a duty. You just have to be. You matter today. You matter to me. Our daughter will find her place on a planet that undervalues her and the color of her face. She'll learn that on this planet that color is called her race. As she listens and observes, she'll ask if she deserves to be taking up space. But her mother and father will always be there to say, you matter today. You're loved and you're heard. You're the mountains on Mars, but you're the dust from the stars. And you don't have to utter a word. Excellence isn't a duty. You just have to be. You matter today. You matter to me. When we bury our brothers and sons, and our sisters can't come up for air, we look at our fellow humans, and nobody seems to care. If we're anything other than perfect, it's easy to despair, and to start to believe that it just wouldn't matter if we were there. I matter today. I make a choice to rejoice in the fact that I'm breathing and destined to rise in the blues of the skies and gravity. Excellence isn't a duty, we just have to be. We matter today. We're family. Look, I just know that some things are true, and I know that I matter to you. I know it's not easy to talk when you're feeling this way, but just know that you matter to me. You matter today.
Well, there we are. The writer, the cast and the producer, as well as another wonderful and heartfelt song from the live recording of Stop the Musical, Musical Talk's 5-star Pick of the Fringe for 2017. And as you heard, it's come to London. Having packed up shop at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in the last couple of days, it's put itself onto the London stage at the Cockpit Theatre, which is in Gate 4th Street, which is near Marylebone, NW8 8EH, and the nearest tube stations, and indeed railway stations, are Marylebone, or Marylebone, depending on how you like to pronounce it, and Edgware Road. It's on between the 30th of August and Saturday the 2nd of September, and the performances start at 7:30 in the evening, with tickets at a mere £12 or £10 for concessions. To find out more, go to the theatre website www.thecockpit.org.uk, or go to the show's own dedicated website www.stopthemusical.com. And if you go on Friday night, there's also a post-show discussion about mental health in the arts called Can a Song Save a Life? So, to conclude this episode, I think that Stop the Musical is one of the most important and exciting shows I've seen for a while. It's a great entertainment, and it has great worth. And those two things are not mutually exclusive, as seeing Stop the Musical will prove to you if you get the chance. Please do try and see it if you can. And keep an eye out for it in the future, as I hope, as Annabelle herself said, there could be more to come. So in some ways, Stop should never stop. I, however, will, and I'm about to do so. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Musical Talk, and don't forget there's going to be plenty more discussion of what you could have seen at this year's Festival Fringe, giving you all the insights into the creative process of a whole number of shows, old writing, new writing, and all in the company of writers, producers, performers, directors, musical directors, you name it. The creative side of musical theatre is a never-ending, bubbling medley of options. And I do hope that Musical Talk's coverage of this year's Fringe will give you a slice and indeed a taste of that wonderful variety. But for the moment, it's time for me to say goodbye. And maybe I'll see you at the Cockpit Theatre. But until then, or until the next episode of Musical Talk, it's time for me to say goodbye. And the best way of doing it is, as always, me saying those words. Here I go. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk edited and presented by Thos. Copyright Musical Talk 2017, except for the songs, where the copyright remains with the original creators. And my thanks to them for letting me play their music on this show. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can, at MusicalTalkThos. I mean, forgive me, your character actually says... Sorry, I'm pointing on the radio. That's very stupid. I've forgotten the name.
Gemma's character.
Chloe, thank you for forgiving me. Chloe, your character, Gemma.
No.
Thank you for
Other way
work.
around.
Yeah.
Gemma.
Oh,
Gemma's
no!
character Chloe.
Oh, right, okay. Gemma's character, Chloe. Thank you very much, Dave. My apologies, by the way.
No.
I bear a very little brain.